be able to tell his story. So thank you for letting me do that.
No problem. We're glad to have you. And then also with us today is Matthew Stossel. Matthew is the class of 1995 here and is our Executive Director of Advancement. Matt, thanks for joining us.
It's tremendous to be here with Jay. And I know that, over the last couple months and talking with Jay, we've just gotten increasingly more excited about today's opportunity to speak with him and hear about his dad and get some firsthand accounts of obviously this phenomenal story that Brandon and I have certainly started to share in a tremendous way here over the last few years that we've been together here in this Advancement and Alumni Office. So really, really grateful to have you with us today, Jay, and look forward to being with you.
Thank you again. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and before we kind of get into things, I just want to tell a quick story as to kind of what brought us here today. A few years ago, Matt was on vacation with his family and they swung through the Naismith Memorial Professional Basketball Hall of Fame. And I remember it like it was yesterday. I received a text from Matt saying, "Do you know who Jack Twyman is?" I said, "Well, yeah, I know he's in our Hall of Fame. I know he played basketball here at the school, but I didn't know much else about him." So later on in that summer, we did some additional research and we were just blown away, not only by Jack's athletic accomplishments on the basketball court, but just who he was as a human being and the story that is himself and Maurice Stokes. And later that summer, we were approached by the school, Matt and myself, and asked to be a part of the new student orientation program. We went through that program talking about the history of Central Catholic, a little bit about the tradition of Central Catholic. And we end each one of those sessions with telling a little story about Jack Twyman. And really the gist of that story is, Jack Twyman is everything that we want you to be as a Central Catholic graduate. And when you say, what is a Central Catholic graduate? Jack is just a perfect example of who we want our young men to become. So with that being said, that led us to here today. And I know that some folks on this call or on the Zoom meeting were classmates with Jack, and others might not know a whole lot about him, but hopefully we can shed some additional light on this story. So we're happy to have you here today. And for those that might not know a whole lot about yourself, Jay, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself as a start, and then we'll kind of move into your dad's life.
Well, I'm the only son. I have three sisters, so I had all the pressure on me to play basketball growing up. But it was an advantage growing up in Cincinnati with your father as a professional basketball player. I am married for 34 years, 4 boys and 1 girl. My sons all played some level of college basketball, so they've got the curse of having to follow in basketball footsteps. I played at Boston University. For my college career, I played for Rick Pitino, his first head coaching job. So that was a little bit of an interesting, twist. And Rick and I have remained very close. He's a super person. 30-year Wall Street career. Worked for First Boston, then 20 years at Bear Stearns and Barclays Capital. Now I'm living in Florida. I do more charity work. I'm the treasurer of a foundation and run an investment committee for an endowment. And we're the 3rd largest grant maker in Palm Beach County. And it's very rewarding. I read with children in the area for a literacy project that's a literacy initiative, part of the foundation, and just really feeling blessed. So I also went to a Jesuit school in Cincinnati, St. Xavier High School, all boys school. And now I feel really guilty. I'm wearing my nicest golf shirt. And we always had to wear coats and ties at school. So now I know my old father's looking at me like, what are you doing? But anyway, that's a little background. Thank you.
No, thank you. And, this is everyday attire for Matt and myself. So that's perfect Florida weather. We're a little jealous. It's about 50 degrees and sunny here today.
Oh, it's
last 30 days, I don't think it's made it above freezing. So
okay.
Completely understand the attire.
What we've got to learn a little bit about your dad, Jay. I'm sure your dad would say, well, that was the Christian Brothers. You went to that Jesuit school and, they were a little lax on the shirts and ties.
Exactly. Exactly. Those Jesuits,
Uh-huh.
different priorities. But,
Well, let's kind of talk a little bit about your dad. Can you give us an idea of what his childhood was like, where he grew up, what kind of the family atmosphere was like, just kind of anything that you remember him talking about in terms of the early days?
he was somewhat quiet about the early days. I do know that his mother was a school teacher. His father was an athlete. He played baseball, basketball, football. I think he was a semi-pro in a lot of sports, but I think he spent most of his time as a pool shark. So I think it was a little bit of a different time back in the late 40s, early 50s in Pittsburgh. So, it was lower blue collar, upbringing. I think my dad was called upon to help with the bills and raise, and go out and work. He was a caddy. He became the caddy master at a local club. Actually, my grandfather, my dad's father's name was Sky, and my youngest, we named him Sky in honor of him. So we don't think poorly of Sky. We think, great of Sky. He actually supposedly beat Minnesota Fats in a pool match it's a legendary match when Minnesota Fats was touring through Pittsburgh, and Sky Twyman took him to town. So that was a good thing. But Dad was a caddy, but it was a rough upbringing. But I think he really valued his relationships from Central Catholic. His best friend in life was Gene Farrell, an alumni. Gene was the manager of the high school basketball team. And, he was probably 5'8", skinny guy, but they became friends for life. And Gene actually ended up being the club champion at Oakmont Country Club in golf, a very accomplished golfer. And, I always refer to him as Uncle Gene. And whenever anybody meet Uncle Gene, he goes, how is he related to you? Because there's a little different size, but yeah, the fond stories about growing up in Central Catholic, without a doubt.
That's great. So Gene's son-in-law emailed over today, Marty, class of '86, Central Catholic. So he says hello. So that's kind of a natural transition into my next question for you. Your dad grew up in Oakland on North Craig Street, not too far from Central Catholic, a stone's throw away.
Yep.
We know that Jack's basketball career didn't start to his senior year, and that, he was cut his first 3 years at Central Catholic. As you can imagine, we received a lot of questions about that. Who was that coach that cut him for 3 years? Did your dad have anything to say about that? What did he talk about, in terms of his experience at Central Catholic and what Central Catholic meant to him?
Well, I mean, he was a deeply religious person, number one. So I'm sure the foundations of that faith were instilled in him at Central Catholic. So, I know the other generations, thank you for that. But he, I think what happened back then is, and he did talk a little bit about getting cut. He felt that was really what burned, the log of desire and made him work hard, because being told you're not good enough makes you, just work that much harder to achieve that goal. And, I think he was definitely not the most gifted athlete, but he was big. And really what happened was early on, he was a big child too. And his mother saw this kid and just saw he was about the same size as other kids. He actually graduated from high school when he was 16 years old. So he was 16 his senior year, and that's when he made the varsity team. So when you're thinking about it in that perspective, that's actually pretty impressive to have a dominating career at 16 against a bunch of 17 and 18-year-olds because of the difference. So, and he graduated from college at 20 years old. So, and that, thanks to my grandmother, I guess maybe it's a blessing, maybe it was a curse, but it made him work his tail off, and he became very accomplished as a shooter. I think he shot 200 shots a day, and 100 free throws a day is how the legend goes. And, just that persistence is really what drove him to just do well. Yeah.
It's interesting, Jay, when we went up to, when we were at the Hall of Fame, he lists and talks about that right there on his plaque. It talks about Central Catholic and working out in the Central Catholic High School gymnasium, and I looked around, the other plaques. Not too many people referenced their high school, so it was that made it even that much more special to share with my sons when we were walking through there.
Oh, neat. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, this picture is from the Hall of Fame, from they have a rotunda in the main hall where they have all the pictures of all the inductees. So I thought it'd be nice as a remembrance for him. Yeah, it's a great experience to go up there.
We must have had an incredible senior year. That 1950-1951 basketball team captured a Catholic City League championship, eventually lost in the state playoffs to Johnstown from Erie. So, it must have been a tremendous senior year. I know, when we look at athletes these days, they're usually getting recruited at, freshman, sophomore, junior year to only play 1 year and eventually earn a scholarship to Cincinnati. He must have had an incredible season. So can you just give us some highlights, about your dad's college career, or anything that stands out to you, anything that he has mentioned about that?
Well, his college career, he really loved his coach, Ed Jucker. He met my mother, so I think he always talks about the blessing of that. And but as far as athletically goes, I mean, I think there were only 4 jerseys that were retired at the University of Cincinnati. His is one of them. He had an All-American career. It was close to Pittsburgh, so I think it was not that far to go. But yeah, he had some he averaged 25 points a game, 17 rebounds a game. Pretty amazing career. They finished 3rd in the NIT tournament that year, which I think, that was the NCAA of the time. And coincidentally, they beat St. Francis in the 3rd place game. And Dad never let Maurice Stokes forget about that, because Maurice Stokes was the star of St. Francis. And so, I think Maurice always says they won the game. Jack, you're remembering it wrong, but I did look it up last night, and it actually is Cincinnati won the game. An interesting, just a random fact though, on his basketball team at University of Cincinnati, Sandy Koufax was a walk-on, the legendary baseball player. And Tony Trabert was also on the team and was a roommate of his in college, and he was on the tennis team. So he had some legendary other sports figures there. And we would get Tony Trabert coming by the house always, just to visit when he was in town in Cincinnati to do a television broadcast, and they would play tennis and stuff. So, but yeah, and I think just the relationships that he had from that time were great. And, it was just, I think things worked out very well, and thank goodness he got cut, because he really was accomplished and ready to go, and really not going to take anything for granted, having just made his high school team a senior year. And that was the only scholarship he got offered. So I don't know how that happened, but it really worked out well.
Yeah, I definitely say so. In 1955, after his career at Cincinnati, he was ultimately drafted by the Rochester Royals. What did that mean to your dad? Did he ever talk about, the fact of, what it felt like being an NBA basketball player and making it to that point, given the circumstances that he was cut 3 times in high school?
It was not as slam dunk as it is today. Back then, I think his first salary was like $10,000 a year. I think there was a competition with professional basketball from the industrial league back then. So the NBA was just really sort of a growing league. But, just to be able to accomplish, to get to this level, everybody that played for the love of the game. And, as a result, they were really like a brotherhood. And, but no, he always said to me growing up, he goes, just take basketball as far as you can, because it will open up some other doors in life. And it's not, I think he looked at it as, it was great, played 11 years, but, it really afforded him the other career opportunities that he really sort of built upon after his NBA career was over. A little different mindset than what was going on today, than what is going on today. I think, like I said, the average salary is around $12,000 a year. Whereas today, I think the average salary is like 20 million a year. So it's sort of a one and done. You're set for life if you make the NBA today. But back then it was a little bit different. But I think he was the second pick of the second round. Got picked to the Rochester Royals, and Maurice Stokes was the second pick of the first round going to the Rochester Royals. So two guys from Pittsburgh that really didn't know each other that well end up on the same team. So it was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's good stuff. In doing some research and from some of the things that I've heard in the past, it wasn't uncommon for some of the NBA players to be selling insurance on the side in the off season back in those days.
He had a big insurance. That's what he did. He did the local broadcasts for the local sports. He got an insurance business going. So he sold insurance, and sort of that was the foundation for after basketball, sort of the directions he went with that. But yeah, you could not support a family of, he had 3 and 4, eventually on just the NBA salary. You really needed to have other ways to support it. So you really had to have a love for the game.
Absolutely. You had mentioned Maurice and Maurice Stokes, Pittsburgh native, being drafted, that same round, that very same year with your father. One of the questions that has come up is, prior to that point, prior to them becoming teammates, how well did they know each other? Did they find themselves on the summer basketball circuit in Pittsburgh? Did your dad ever mention anything about the relationship prior to becoming teammates?
I think they knew of each other, but they weren't really close to each other. And I think it was really a situation where, it was more competition. I'm sure that there are some legendary games at some of the parks, that probably took place because, I don't know if you're aware, Maurice had a similar situation in high school where he was cut his first 2 years from the basketball team also. So you had two very hungry guys that had an edge and a chip that probably looking to prove themselves, but they weren't particularly close. No.
Yeah, I read something the other day that said that Westinghouse basketball team could have beat a lot of the college teams that were around here back then that Maurice played on. So
yeah, I think, were they in different leagues or something?
Yeah.
Was there a different? Okay, because when I did not realize that Central Catholic lost in the finals, but I thought Westinghouse, when Maurice made the team, they won their finals, so it must have been a different.
Yes. It was, I'm not sure exactly how the split or how they were split up back then, but there seemed to be, a sort of a bit of a Catholic section, but the teams played outside of the Catholic section. And there certainly was the kind of the city championship too, as well. So I'm not quite sure of the details and how that broke down, but taking one of the things that I wanted to look through was, did they ever play against each other in high school? And, Central Catholic versus Westinghouse, no, they did not. At least on paper, they did not. So,
well, if they did play each other, I would have heard about it because
sure.
they definitely were. They definitely were. To say trash talking was what it was. This was trash talk. Every time they got together, it was always jabbing each other. Even in a wheelchair, he didn't let Maurice didn't cut him a break at all. But they did play each other in college, so there was a bragging rights there. Yeah.
So kind of leading into, a little later on down the road, that 1958 season, Maurice Stokes was knocked unconscious driving to the court, managed to finish that game, 3 days later after their first playoff game in Detroit. On their flight home, he becomes ill. And, that really leads us into the Twyman Maurice Stokes story that we want to spend a good time taking a look at and talking about. For those that might not be familiar with the story, can you provide us with an overview of kind of what took place in how your dad kind of remembered that happening and what he had to say about it?
Well, I mean, it was, you set it up correctly. It was the last game of the season. They were up in Detroit. Maurice was going up for either a rebound or a shot, and he was undercut, fell flat on his head, knocked unconscious. And in those days, when you got knocked unconscious, a trainer or somebody just came out with some ammonia or smelling salts, woke you back up, slapped you in the face a little bit, threw you back in the game. And so Maurice went back in the game feeling woozy and finished that game. And I didn't know it was 3 days later. I thought it might have been even the next night they had a game. And Maurice was sort of nauseous through the night, was nauseous before the game. There was another person on the team that also was having flu type symptoms. So they thought it was just a flu going around to the team. Maurice played that next night and had a sluggish game. And that was the last game. It was a 1-game playoff game. And so they lost. They were on the flight back to Cincinnati after playing, and, flight takes off, and, they start to reach altitude, and Maurice all of a sudden starts to go into some sort of convulsions, goes unconscious. It was described that he just was profusely sweating. So his body was just going through some major problems. And he was in a coma, was non-responsive. There was actually a player that was somebody, I heard they gave him his last rites. They weren't sure that they were going to make it, but they decided to continue on to Cincinnati because the best medical care would be there. So they flew to Cincinnati. He was unconscious. There was an ambulance waiting. They took him to Christ Hospital. His body was just wreaking havoc, and they packed him on ice to try and bring his temperature down because it was just fighting to stay alive. And they brought the temperature down. He came to, but he was completely paralyzed. And it was a very cruel disease, in that his mind was crystal clear. He could think, he could understand what everybody was saying, but he had no control, no voluntary muscle movement. So he could not, he could just breathe. He could blink his eyes, but he was completely paralyzed. And it was described as encephalopathy, which was an infection of the brain. And, it just really goes to show you the protocols of today of when you get a concussion. A lot of people think, boy, that seems a little overkill, right? You get a concussion, we hold him out, we monitor him, we make sure he doesn't come back in. I mean, this is the prime example, because if they had the protocols of today back then, I think we probably would be hearing about Maurice Stokes and the Cincinnati Royals as having a lot of championship banners and a lot of, he would have been one of the best players in NBA history. He was just a monster. He was like LeBron James, before LeBron James, Michael Jordan before, he was a compilation of a lot of great players today. So he's a player way before his time. But an overview of what happened. I can go on about the story, but he basically was in a hospital in Cincinnati. He had $7,000 of savings. They had no insurance. They were independent contractors back then. As we said earlier, the average salary for an NBA player back then was about $10,000 to $15,000 a year. And here Maurice was looking at full-time hospital care. And, all the other players sort of scattered at the end of the season, went home. Dad was from Cincinnati. After a couple of weeks, it seemed like this was not going to get better. And he really sat down with my mother, and they made a joint decision as a couple that, boy, this is a teammate, and this is a person that really needs help. I really want to take this on. And I really think that it's it's somebody in need. I'm here, and, we got to do it. And they decided to move forward. And he took on, it goes on in detail. I'm not really doing it justice, but he basically, took on all the financial responsibilities. He led a lawsuit to sue workman's comp for the state of Ohio because he was injured in that kind of in a work situation where to try and, whatever he could do to raise money to raise bills, he took it on. Maurice's parents were from Pittsburgh. They were working in the steel mills, and they really didn't have the wherewithal to go traveling back and forth and to care for Maurice. And a stipulation of the workman's comp settlement that they got was that as long as he's residing in Ohio, they can get and help supplement some of his hospital charges. So that's why he stayed there, and he took on, guardianship of Maurice to handle all the incidentals and everything going forward. And then it just became a full-time, job to go do that. And he became a part of our family, really. Maurice, most weekends we come to the house. as he was going through his therapy, and he was, he was able to then communicate a little bit, a lot of speech therapy, a lot of physical therapy. I mean, it was a grueling battle to try and get some sort of semblance of normalcy, which he never really got to. But we were all in as a family to try and figure out a way to help this man, live a life. And so, I mean, ask me questions. What more can I tell you? It was just, people ask my dad, why did you do it? And what drew you to that? And he was very humble about it. And he basically, I think there was a quote in one of the papers that said, Maurice was on his own. Something had to be done. I was the only one there, so I became that someone. And he looked at it as simple as one teammate looking out for another teammate, one human being taking care of another human being. So, and like I said, I don't know how old the alumni are that are on this call, and maybe you have some students that are on the call, but, just think about somebody 23 years old, starting a family, taking on that kind of responsibility. I have kids that are 32 down to 20, and I think about myself when I was 23 years old. That takes a special commitment and a special, calling. And I'm sure, as you said, it's sort of what you epitomize a Central Catholic graduate, that you hope people would meet that call and become that someone. St. Francis has actually done a nice thing. The college where Maurice graduated from, and all the incoming freshmen get a little wristband, and the wristband says, become that someone. And that's part of their orientation, is that, we all as human beings have to sort of step up out of our comfort zone when we're called upon. And it takes a lot of courage to do that.
No, I 100% agree, Jay. I think one of the things when Brandon and I have been speaking with the freshmen these last couple of years, what you talked about, putting into context, I think the big thing is his age, which is just, he's not that much older than you guys are, and to go ahead and say, yeah, I'm going to, because that's not something that you can, you can't really unwind that watch, once you make the decision from the legal standpoint that you're going to go ahead and become the legal guardian. So it is really a phenomenal story. And then to think then between that moment, 1958, all the way through Maurice's life till 1970, day to day, month to month and year to year, that your father and family decided that we were going to do this. And it really is a remarkable thing. And, it's something that, like you said, I have kids myself, and I certainly think back to when I was 23, and I'd like to think that I would do it, but it's, it's a tall drink of water there.
But he was always so downplaying of it and so humble about it. And I think there was something that was described, probably 6 months into it, when Maurice, I mean, he literally would go through 6 hours to 10, 9 hours a day of therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, and but it was a lot of donations. My dad would always, whenever the team would play in a city, he would get a local sports writer to write a story about, we're looking to raise money to help Maurice out, and envelopes would show up in the locker room, with notes like, this is for Maurice. Thank you for doing this. This is for Maurice. Thank you for doing this. And, Dad always talks about some of the special notes that he would get. And, it was, there was one note, he said, Jack, accept this, donation for Maurice's bills. And he goes, I can't think, but only in America where here a Jewish man would be writing a check for a Black man being cared for a white Catholic man. I mean, and this was in 1959, before Martin Luther King, when the racial relationships of the time were not, probably the best. And, but Dad always looked at it as, these are brothers. There was, this was colorblind, and this is what life is about. And this is what we're all about. It's all about brotherhood. And, he got a lot of comments that weren't too kind at the time also about a white man taking care of a Black man. And, I don't want to dwell upon the negatives of it, but it sort of goes to the strength and the vision and the commitment, that to him, it was just, that was all noise, just got to take care of this young man. But that was, and it was a lot of fundraising, and it was a lot of, we can talk about the Kutcher's game. He was approached at one point during a road trip where Milt Kutcher, who ran a resort up in the Catskills, approached him and said, "Jack, I have a great idea to raise money." And he didn't know my dad. He just really felt compelled to pitch in and help when he heard the story. And back in those times, the Catskills were really where a lot of the college basketball players worked as waiters and bellmen. So there was a definite basketball undercurrent from the Catskills, and the different resorts fielded teams. But Milt said, "Listen, I have a hotel, I have a little court, I have wooden stands, I have all this stuff. Why don't we just have, players come up and we can have a fundraiser to raise money for Maurice. You don't have to pay for anything. I'll cover all the costs." And it was pretty amazing. And the first game, they weren't really sure who was going to show up for this game, right? You send out word. It was just, word of mouth. Let's do it. They advertised in the area to get people in the stands. My father wasn't sure who would make it because it would all be under their own expense. And, they were thinking maybe 10, 15 guys might show up. Literally 60 to 70 guys showed up from the NBA. 80% of the league showed up to play in the game. So it was a little bit cumbersome to divide these teams of 30, to play a game, but it was just a massively successful event. And some of the things that people went through to get to the game were legendary. Wilt Chamberlain, who actually worked when he was in college as a bellhop at Kutcher's. Wilt Chamberlain at the time was like the epitome of the league. And he supplemented his income as an NBA player by also touring with the Harlem Globetrotters. And when the game was scheduled for Maurice to play, or for the game to be played for Maurice's honor, Wilt Chamberlain was traveling in Europe. So he needed to get back for this game. So he got on the supersonic Concorde, got under his own expense from France, flew back to New York on the day of the game, took a helicopter, landed the helicopter in the Kutcher's baseball field next to the basketball court, hops out, goes into the layup lines. What an entry that was. And then he's like playing this game. After the game, they're hugging. He gets back on the helicopter, flies back to JFK, gets on the supersonic transport back to the Harlem Globetrotters. I mean, I think the players felt like, because it was very much of a independent contractor type of an arrangement, there was no unions, there was no benefits. They're like, there by the grace of God, I walk and I could be in this person's situation. So it was really a bonding of the league at that time that resonated from this relationship. But to get an idea of the humility and the humbleness of my dad, and that during a lot of the season, one person donated an electric typewriter to Maurice to try and help him communicate, because speech therapy wasn't really working that great, but he was able to maybe hold with straps, get his arms up over the keys, and it was grueling. And Dad came back from a road trip, and the nurses were so excited. They said, "Jack, Maurice has a note for you." And it really took him about a week to put this note together, and just give an idea of how much he had to work to just achieve any kind of muscle movement. But the note said basically, "Jack, how am I ever going to thank you?" That was it. And, my dad always says, he goes, "Maurice, I get much more from this. You think I come here to cheer you up? I come here to get cheered up. I get a lot more out of this from you than you get from me." So, and I think he really felt that way. He felt blessed to be able to help and give comfort to somebody. And I think he tried to instill that in all of us with that relationship. So it was always a great event to have him come over to the house. So it's pretty amazing story.
It sure is. I mean, just incredible. And as you said, the challenges that I'm sure that your father ran into were tremendous, but it never stopped him, and he continued to push forward. Just a special relationship and a special bond that your dad and Maurice shared for sure. And all along still playing basketball along the time too, as at that time too as well, went off to a phenomenal career. 6-time NBA All-Star with the Royals, scored over 15,000 points, ranking 20th on NBA's all-time scoring list at the time of his retirement, eventually being inducted into the Professional Basketball Hall of Fame and having his number 27 jersey retired, at the present day Sacramento Kings. What was life like after basketball for your dad?
Life, he was, I think he looked at basketball as a stepping stone to the rest of his life. He was somebody that did not really dwell on the past. And I think it was a very healthy thing for all of us as kids to see. And I think we try and instill that in our kids, that, when he retired from basketball, he obviously had all these trophies. He had all these, awards and this and that. I mean, it really got to be crazy, all in the basement. But when he retired and moved on and started to focus on his professional career, he basically threw out 99% of his trophies, and he just either donated them or gave them away or gave them to the University of Cincinnati. He doesn't have a trophy room. There's no trophy room in our house. There might be just a couple of small little remembrances about a game here or something there, but he moved forward. And so life was, he was a driven person, and I think he was just a principled, honest. I think he really took an interest, very smart, very inquisitive, worked his tail off. I guess I could anecdotally talk about, he started out in the insurance business, also doing broadcasting, did the NBA Game of the Week for ABC with Chris Schenkel for a couple of years, also did the Olympics, covering the basketball in the '68 Olympics. So that was pretty cool. But he also had an insurance business, and that's a lot of work, right? Because you got to travel on the weekends to go to the NBA games, and then you're hustling all week long to sell insurance. Through the insurance business, he really took a very good interest in, really formed good bonds and relationships, and took a real interest in the businesses that he was insuring. Was invited on the board of directors of a food company, Superfood Services, that he had as a client of having the insurance for, and they just valued his membership as a board. And when they had a transition of CEOs, he got sort of elected as the CEO of a publicly traded company, Superfood Services. Took this company that was probably like the 25th food wholesaler in the country and created the 3rd largest food wholesaler in the country. Just was very, very successful in everything that he did, just through hard work, honesty, trust, and just doing it the right way. And, I think sometimes it was, he was almost criticized in his business career for being too loyal to customers. And I think the food business went through a transition where food wholesalers started to horizontally integrate into like retail, and they would form their own stores, but he never wanted to do that because he didn't want to compete with his customers, and very principled person in the business world. Tough father to grow up with, though, when he knows what it takes to be successful. I remember he would say to me early on, I remember he took me aside, he said, "Jay, do you want to be a good basketball player?" I said, "Of course, I want to be a great basketball player." He goes, "Do you want me to just help you through this process?" And I should have been careful about what I wished for there, but because it's a lot of work, and I will be on you to work. And I said, "No, I want to be the best I can be." And boy, from that day on, it was just brutal. And sometimes it had a little bit of a frictional relationship, but you come home from work. How many jump shots did you shoot today? Did you shoot 600? How many free throws did you shoot? I'd be like, "God, Dad, come on. Can you leave me alone? I mean, I had to do this." And then it got to the point where when I was in high school, I think I shared this story with you, he was just, we would have this weekend basketball game where he was really going to just show me that he was still in charge, and you got to work harder to beat me, and you got to work harder to get. So we'd have a one-on-one match every Saturday morning, and you know, it was sort of to prove a point. Hey, you didn't shoot enough shots this week, didn't do enough here, didn't do enough here. And he pretty much owned me till my junior year in high school. And then my junior year in high school, when I could start dunking a basketball, I started beating him. And that was not a pleasant household during those weekends. And it went on for about 3 weeks. I beat him 3 weeks in a row. And the house became unbearable for those weekends because he was moping around. He's like, I can't believe it. You would think he would be really happy that I was finally beating him, but he was very competitive. And finally, when he went to work on Monday, I went to school, and one Monday, a construction crew showed up, and bulldozers were bulldozing up the basketball court. My mom put her foot down and said, no more one-on-one matches from here on out. And she bulldozed up the court, and we never competed in basketball from that point on. We just competed on the golf course, which was a little bit safer for our physical health. But, you know, his religion was really always there throughout. You know, he was, you know, very loyal, church every Sunday, always did the collection, gave the glare to people that didn't contribute to the collection box. I mean, he was very, you know, he had a very good relationship with our local church, and was reflected in all aspects, and even until the end. You know, he just deeply religious person.
Yeah, I know we've had some conversations about that in the past, that he was, a man of deep faith, and that his faith really carried him, through his life. How did that trickle down to you and your family?
Well, you know, I think what happened, he was in the hospital at the end, and, you know, you really learn a lot about people. And I you know, not that I've seen a lot of people in this situation, but I'm sure the beliefs and the deep faith, when you're faced with the end of your life on earth, how you handle that. And, you know, when he had a bout, it went on for 7 or 8 years with a blood cancer and CLL. And it was, you know, you go through treatment. He went through treatment when he was 72. I remember when that happened, he sort of kept it from us as a family, but I've heard anecdotally, you know, when he came back with the prognosis, he said, Carol, here we go. Another thing we got to overcome. You know, just didn't bat an eye, didn't talk to the kids about it, just went through his treatments and sort of got put to bed, and was put at bay for a period of time. And then at 78, it resurfaced. And this time it wasn't, you know, here we go again. Just sort of, this is what life throws you. You got to attack it. And he went through his treatments, and the treatments, it became apparent, was going to be a little bit more of a battle. So, you know, started to slowly make the family aware. And it got to the point where he was in the hospital going through treatments, and it really did not look so good. And so he said, listen, I want to get all my grandkids together. And, you know, he went through, flew everybody into town, and he was just holding court with all the grandkids. He was smiling, happy, telling jokes. You know, he's being propped up by, you know, steroids, keeping his lungs going. He had wires going everywhere, but he was just laughing and telling stories and giving kids advice. And, you know, one of the things he always really stressed was, hey, I know that I've lived a good life, and I'm going to be looking down on you, number one. And I'm really excited to see what's around the other corner. And because I want to see what God has in store for me. And that was just inspiring for all of the grandkids to hear. And he said, listen, I'm going to be winking down at you, so please look out for the signs that I'm going to be winking at you. And so all the kids, whenever they see number 27, we always get these texts from all over the place. 27. I saw 27. I checked into a hotel room today, and it was room 27. And I thought of Grandpa. And, you know, something else happened. I thought of Grandpa. And so, you know, and even the priest that said his eulogy said, boy, Jack taught us a lot about how to live our life. Sounds morbid, but Jack showed us taught us a lot how to face death. And, you know, it really was comforting to see how at peace he was with his life when he passed away. You know, he did confide with me at one point. He said, boy, I'm 78 years old. I'm so young. And I said, Dad, you're 78 years old, but you've accomplished more in your life than most people accomplish in, you know, 3 lifetimes. So, you know, he just, he felt at peace, and he does. It's real. And I tell you what, I talk to my mom I talk to her every day, but I think at certain times I've said, boy, don't you feel like you need to date or need to do some other things with your life? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little personal, but and she's like, I have a conversation with your dad every night. He's there. So, and so he's around us, and he's looking out. And I tell my kids, I feel really secure knowing that I have a 240-pound, 6'8" guardian angel looking out for me. So, and all you kids should be feeling the same way. So, and one other quick story, I'm probably going on too long about this, but my youngest, who was probably one of the closest to my dad, my dad passed away in May, and in August of that year, he goes back to his grade school, and they issue lockers for the locker. And, his two numbers for his NBA career for all but his last year, his number was 27, and his last year, his number was 31. And so my son gets issued his lock for his locker, and he looks at it and he starts crying. And the teacher comes up to him and goes, "What are you crying for?" He goes, "My combination's 27031. So she goes, "What? Why is that making you sad?" He goes, "That's Grandpa." So it was just, he's there looking out over all of us. But anyway, so that, I think that just resonates from faith, and resonates from being at peace, and knowing you're doing the right thing, and knowing that, we're all here to service God, and, there's a greater calling for everything here. You can't bring all the stuff you've built up and accomplished with you, because you're exposed, and it's sort of what the decision is from there on. But he felt very, very secure in making that next step.
Well, I didn't tell you this earlier when we touched base on the phone, but I'm confident that he's with us here today. For reasons we won't get into, I couldn't get into my office this morning. And,
oh no.
I was working out of the library, and on my way over to my office, when I was able to get in, I took the long route through the first floor, and I usually just kind of go right out the door. But I went down this one stretch of hallway, and I just so happened to take a look up, and there was his Hall of Fame photo. And
oh
I
boy,
could have looked right. I could have went a different way. So I'm confident that he's with us here today. And I know you've mentioned that several times in the past, how he just kind of, little things here and there that he's around. I saw that, and I immediately, thought of you, and I thought of you saying that. And
be careful what
made
you
me a
wish
little
for.
nervous.
Be careful. He'll be there. He
Yeah.
was somebody that wasn't too subtle about making his opinion known. I think he still does it. So,
I'm waiting
but
for
anyway,
you.
I don't want, I make it sound like he was the hero of this whole thing, but Maurice Stokes was an amazing person. So, I mean, they both just were an amazing thing for a family to be exposed to. And I think it's so wonderful that Central Catholic is really making a concerted effort to make that relationship a part of the orientation for those kids, because, what better way to, number one, what better way to honor a legacy, to keep it alive and going. But the better way to keep it going is to have it continue to teach good lessons. And, I think that would make nothing would make my dad happier than to know that, he's influencing kids and influencing people, and maybe getting them to think about things the right way.
Absolutely. Leading me into kind of that last question that I have for you here, your dad passing in 2012, how would you describe his legacy, and what are your hopes for his legacy in the future?
Well, his legacy is hard. It's sort of hard to just put a number on it, or say, I really, really value what the NBA has done. Number one, the NBA, when my father passed away, David Stern called up and said, "Listen, we're going to institute an award to honor your dad's relationship with Maurice Stokes." And he said, when your father passed away, I was reading the New York Times, I was reading the obituaries, I was reading all the information. And he goes, this is what we want the NBA to be known for, is brotherhood and teammates. these are life lessons that we should be teaching people about working as a team. And we want to, so they instituted the Twyman Stokes Teammate of the Year Award. And it's really a great award it's voted on by the players of the NBA. It's not sports writers or anything like that. The players vote amongst themselves about what player in the league provides the best, role model, the best consulting, the best, everything, just the best teammate. And what a great honor for Maurice and my father to have that be something that will be out there forever. And David Stern said, this is not going to be a 1-2 year flash in the pan. It's going to be, for as long as we have awards at the NBA. And, and it's not a small award. Chauncey, I listed the names. Chauncey Billups won it the first year, Shane Battier, Vince Carter, Tim Duncan, Dirk Nowitzki, Jamal Crawford, Mike Conley, Drew Holiday. I was at every award ceremony, want to represent the family, and every single person that wins this award really has not a lot of clue of the background and the story. And they all, to a T, say, boy, when I researched what I was getting here, he goes, I just want, he wants to give my sisters a hug, my mom a hug. They said, this is not an award about me. This is a honoring of your father. And I'm honored to be able to pass on that legacy. So, that's a great legacy to have, passed along. And I think, a phone call, I think I told you, when my father passed away, we were, I was fielding a lot of calls from people all over the place. Jesse Jackson called, all these celebrities were calling, but I get one call that was very memorable. It was from Bob Pettit, and my mom was out. And so I pick up the phone. Is Carol there? And I said, well, she's out, but can I help? This is, Jack Twyman's son, Jay. And he goes, Jay, Bob Pettit, I just want to call. And I want to tell you that I think it's BS that all these players in the NBA, they all hug each other, all kiss each other before a game. I mean, when we played, it was battle. These guys were my mortal enemies. And I got to tell you what, the only guy that I would hug before a game was your dad, because I love what your dad did for Maurice. So I just want to let you know that. And, best wishes to Carol. And then he hung up. And I just wow, that sort of blew me away. But so I think keeping the story out there and just, things like what you're doing here with this call and just talking to people. I've had the great fortune of being able to go back and speak to some of the teams at Boston University, my alma mater, and I would tell the story and the relationship, and people have the same sort of reaction that, boy, I wish I knew. So it really is word of mouth, and maybe we'll try and get a book written or something, but and we've had some fits and starts on that front, but I think it's just a story that the word of mouth makes it resonate. And I think it's just, he would be very happy if he's doing some good and having some good influence on people's lives. So the legacy is out there, and, he'll butt his head into our business whenever we need it. And, but hopefully it will be all a positive experience for everybody.
Well, thank you. Again, we're honored to have you here today, and we're honored to have your father as an alum and a member of our Hall of Fame. It truly is a special story. And as long as I'm here, and I know as long as Matt's here, we're certainly committed to telling that story to every freshman that comes through this door. And it's my hope that at some point in the future, we can have you up here in person, telling that story to our students. So, once COVID and everything gets behind us, we'll be in touch. So again, thank you for being with us today and sharing a little bit about yourself and the life of your father. Is just a truly remarkable person, and we couldn't be more appreciative of your time.
Thank you very much, and it was an honor to be able to share the story. And I would be there in an instant if the opportunity came to speak to your class. So let's keep that on the calendar sometime in the future. And I can't wait till this COVID thing ends, because I can't wait for life to get back to normal. But thank you for the opportunity.
Great. And, that's all the time that we have here today. A recording of this session is going to be available on our YouTube channel shortly. I hope that everybody will join us for one of our future virtual events. Our next Alumni Mass of Remembrance is going to take place on Thursday, March 4th at 5 p.m. And then our next virtual alumni speaker series will take place on March 17th with a presentation titled Building Interpersonal Relationships While Valuing and Representing Our Differences. What does perspective taking have to do with it? And that is going to be delivered by Dr. Ed Scott, a member of the class of 1983. And to learn more about any of our virtual events, I hope you check out our alumni platform, Central Catholic Alumni Connect. It can be accessed at centralalumni.com. Thanks again for everybody that's tuned in. Thanks again, Jay. We appreciate you being here. And that's all that we have. St. John the Baptist de La Salle, pray for us. Live Jesus in our hearts forever. Thank you.
Thank you.